who is Shalinee Kishore, Associate Director of the I-CPIE at the Lehigh University. Shalinee is Iacocca Chair Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering at Lehigh University, which is located in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. With more than 20 years of experience, research experience in communications theory, networks, and signal processing, with applications to cyber-physical system and smart energy systems. She received her PhD in electrical engineering from Princeton University and her BS and MS degrees from Rutgers University. She has published over 100 scientific papers in leading IEEE journals and conferences, and received research grants from the U.S. National Science Foundation, the U.S. Department of Energy, state agencies, and major corporations. She serves as the Associate Director of the Institute for Cyber-Physical Infrastructure and Energy at Lehigh. She is the recipient of the Presidential Early Career Award for Scientists and Engineers, the National Science Foundation Career Award, the PC Rossin As-sistant Professorship, the Joel and Ruth Spira Excellence in Teaching Award, and the AT&T Labs Fellowship. She's also served as a Kavli Fellow for the National Academy of Sciences. Shalinee, thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to your presentation. I have to say that as a young man, I grew up just outside of Rutgers, so I hope that you enjoyed the time that you spent in New Brunswick, and I'm looking forward to your presentation. I think you're muted. Could you unmute yourself?
I'm sorry. Apologies.
Well,
I'm doing this every day. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak. Thank you to the USEA and to Barry Worthington for inviting us. I'm representing an institute at Lehigh, which is the Institute for Cyber-Physical Infrastructure and Energy. It's a relatively new institute, but it draws on expertise that's longstanding at Lehigh, particularly in the energy space. So I'm going to use the opportunity today to talk a bit about the institute and just give you some highlights of some of the things that we've been doing. I apologize. I'm having a hard time kind of doing the play of the slides here. I'm not sure. I guess you're seeing the full slide layout, right?
We're seeing, yes, we're seeing the slide, and we're seeing it's not in slideshow presentation, but we see it clearly. So it's if it's not a problem for you, it works fine.
All right, that's fine then. I'll continue this way. For those of you who may not know of Lehigh, we're a private university, one of the most distinguished in the U.S. It's a research university located in Pennsylvania in the Lehigh Valley. It boasts a rigorous academic community of nearly 7,000 students across 5 distinguished colleges. In fact, if I had given this talk to you a year ago, I would mention that we have 4 colleges and 1 upcoming. Just a month ago, we brought our inaugural class into Lehigh's College of Population Health, which, given our current circumstance, seems to be a pretty timely endeavor. So Lehigh has a lot of, as I mentioned, a wide prestigious portfolio of research accomplishments. And in order to coalesce some of the research strengths, the university about 2 years ago formed 3 new interdisciplinary research institutes, including I-CPIE, which is the Institute for Cyber-Physical Infrastructure and Energy. The focus for I-CPIE is really, and the big grand challenge, applications in critical infrastructure and energy systems that support communities and enable economic growth. Now, no infrastructure energy system these days is just a physical system. It has a lot of cyber components to it. So the Institute is focusing on advances in physical systems, cyber systems, and of course, cyber physical systems. Moreover, because infrastructure and energy systems are used by society and by human beings, the human and social impact of these systems is also within the sort of scope of our institute. The institute has an impressive breadth of expertise. It merges science and social science, and we even reach out to the humanities and the arts. There's a total of about 85 faculty members from 3 different colleges spanning 20 different departments. And given the size and scale of our faculty, which is around 400 or 500 faculty members in total at the university, it's a pretty large endeavor. And our teams, because we draw on such wide variety of expertise, really can leverage this interdisciplinary background to tackle big questions, right? Questions like resilience and efficiency and reliability of the infrastructure and energy systems, especially in the face of uncertain needs, but also threats that come from man-made or from natural hazard events. These questions also examine key roles that data plays in improving the infrastructure and energy systems, as well as the lives of the humans and communities they serve. Now, our expertise spans 8, so I'm going to use my mouse here, 8 different research thrusts, which are shown here. They range from energy delivery systems to large infrastructure systems, from cybersecurity to resilient communities. These are all broad areas, and within each broad area, we have research teams that are working. And we've shown a sample of these research teams here. So they range from looking at infrastructure monitoring, for example, of nuclear power plants, to energy storage, and from cybersecurity of energy delivery systems to energy efficient recovery of impaired water, for example. I'm going to highlight the 3 green areas as sort of new efforts that we're engaged in right now, and I'll get into a little bit more details with them. But I also wanted to point out the 3 gray down here as sort of interesting areas that might be of interest to the audience. So for example, we have a project, DOE-sponsored project going on in the area of offshore wind energy. The focus and novelty here lies in the ways in which we design and simulate these off-wind energy structures, and the approach is really to use a combination of hardware and software, or what's known as hybrid simulation. Lehigh has a very long-standing research center focused on large structural systems that we can draw upon to do this work. It'll allow you to look at how the structures might operate in different wind, waves, and currents. And the really neat thing about this research is that the group is looking at the structure from the tip of the turbine all the way down to the mud and seafloor foundations. Another research area is in the space of marine hydrokinetic energy systems. We're one of the few universities in the US that have a longer-term effort going on in this area. Now, for those of you who may not be aware, MHK systems are renewable energy systems that draw on the natural motion of water in oceans, rivers, and tides to draw electricity. Our expertise here spans from the design of the individual energy converters all the way to MHK farms and their integration into the power grid and even into the electricity market. And then finally, I want to point out this additional research area we have going on here, which, like many universities, we're pivoting to look at how COVID is impacting all aspects of our research endeavors. The team that we're looking, that's working here in particular, is mostly comprised of social scientists and some engineers, and they're concerned with how infrastructure and energy systems and communities are responding to COVID-19 and how individual and social perception of risk influences their decisions. This team had actually received funding prior to COVID-19 to do this work and had been planning on looking at past disasters. In particular, they were going to dissect what had happened during Hurricane Florence. But when COVID-19 hit, they pivoted the work and started to look at this ongoing crisis by getting real-time data through surveys to understand what COVID-19 risk perception is among groups of participants and how the perception is influencing decision-making. Before I go on and talk about the 3 other areas that I promised, I just want to briefly mention that I-CPIE's job is to sort of help these teams, the number of teams that we showed you, become successful. And one of the ways we do that is to help these teams find potential partners. We do this by building a very vast network of institute and project partners. The institute partners provide input on technology needs and opportunities. They shape our priorities and activities, and of course, they gain access to our faculty and students. Project partners are a little bit more intimately involved with projects. They collaborate with the faculty. They may sponsor the projects themselves or might work together with the faculty to seek external funding. And again, because they're more intimately involved, they actually participate in planning and monitoring of the projects. We do have an external advisory council. It's an impressive list of industry and national lab members, and many of these folks are actually engaged in a lot of the research projects that I highlighted before. Okay, so the three areas that I wanted to mention, and the first is in the area of cybersecurity. One of our research teams is looking at the problem of cybersecurity from the human perspective. Okay, so this is so taking a few steps back. Classic cybersecurity is really focused on identifying and eliminating threats posed by network intrusion. The last few years, research in this space has started to look at cyberphysical cybersecurity. Right, this is the notion that an attacker can do significant damage to an infrastructure or an energy system if they can intrude the network and exploit some knowledge of the physical mechanics of the system. Right. These attacks are harder to detect and harder to defend against, and there's potential for them to cause more physical damage and possibly even harm humans. So our research team has been looking at these types of cyber-physical cybersecurity concerns for energy delivery systems. We actually belong to this DOE center, DOE-funded cybersecurity center called SEEDS, Secure Evolvable Energy Delivery Systems. And along with our partners from the University of Arkansas, MIT, Carnegie Mellon, and Florida International, we've been looking at this problem of cyber-physical cybersecurity for predominantly the power grid and for natural gas networks. Some of the areas of interest that we focused in on include spoofing attacks for PMUs, data falsification attacks that exploit renewable generation volatility, attacks on demand response systems, how attacks on the power grid can perpetuate to the natural gas network and vice versa, and so on. So that's been the work that we have been doing the last, I would say, about 5 years or so. And now the researchers are sort of extending this effort to include the humans in the cyber-physical loop. Okay, so the humans are part of the cyber-physical cybersecurity loop because they are the operators and users of the systems, and of course they can also be the attackers. Right? So the social and psychological motivations and reactions of each should be incorporated in designing and adapting cybersecurity measures. The focus here is to develop models of these systems that include the human interactions and develop cybersecurity measures that assess risk, that detect attacks, and that apply defense mechanisms against them. In true nature to our interdisciplinary mission, this research team in particular involves not just engineers, computer scientists, and cybersecurity specialists, but also psychologists and social psychologists. Our primary application domain is the electricity grid, although I do want to mention that recently our faculty group has started to look at the same problem for autonomous vehicles as well. The next area I wanted to talk about is the electrification of transit. I think one of the speakers from the national labs talked about the tight coupling that's happening between transportation and the power grid. And this is the research area that I'm highlighting today that actually addresses this for us. There are efforts throughout the US and worldwide to convert mass transit fleets to be either heavily or entirely electric. In the US, there are many states and municipalities that have adopted goals and mandates to reach zero emission status for their mass transit fleets. For example, in California, you have a target date of 2040 when all public fleets have to be zero emissions. So what our researchers are doing is to how to enable these goals via electrification. And the real challenge for transit agencies is that they have to change their business as usual. Because of electrification, their transportation infrastructure becomes tightly coupled to the power grid. They have to go beyond the business of just managing buses and bus drivers and bus yards and things like that to now actually consider power and energy resources locally and to learn how to optimally interact with the grid. Moreover, they have to make changes on how they plan, schedule, and operate their bus fleets to deal with electric energy constraints, costs, and potential outages as well. For example, the bus range for electric buses is less than for diesel. And for some transit agencies, their bus routes have been designed with a 400+ mile bus range in mind. If rerouting is needed to accommodate electric buses, what should those routes look like, not just from a technical perspective, and this is where we're bringing in some social scientists and urban planners to consider how do you deliver a more equitable transportation option to the community when you do this kind of rescheduling and rerouting of the system. So the kinds of things we're looking at: adaptive interactive microgrids to support the infrastructure that the transit agencies get to control, the power and transportation dispatch algorithms, and recognizing that there's going to be a lot more data available for the entire system, both the power and the transportation infrastructure, and how those can be exploited to make the system adapt and be more dynamic. To do the research and make the research directly.
I'm sorry, we're running short on time.
Okay.
We have a speaker. The next speaker is some time constraints. He's calling in from Paris. So if we could ask you to wrap up a little bit, I really appreciate it. I'm so sorry that we have to ask you.
I literally just have one more slide after this one, if that's okay.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Yep. So I was just going to say that this project, we're collaborating with a transit agency. It's the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority, or VTA. VTA has already started its path towards electrification. It has a California Energy Commission grant to purchase a number of electric buses, and several are already in operation. And we're working with them in planning and developing what lies ahead for them as they move towards full electrification. Other partners in this collaboration are indicated here. We do have some universities we work with, one locally in California, one in Minnesota, and of course we're involved with a number of national labs as well. And finally, the last research project I wanted to mention is one looking at risk measures for electricity grids. So the goal here is to develop a framework and platform for managing risk of grid assets, and as well as the full power system. The aim is to develop risk measures that can be coordinated into current electricity operations to improve economic efficiency. So our approach is to use a data-driven way of developing stochastic risk measures that are objective, non-discriminatory, accurate, consistent, and reproducible via an explicitly defined process. And then what we want to do is use the measures to develop scores, much like used in banking and finance, that quantify a risk of assets, but also the risk that these assets offer to the overall electricity delivery system, both during normal operations and during disruptions. So we'll be looking at both centrally managed and market-driven infrastructures. We'll consider both reliability and resilience measures, and how they can be handled both during system operation as well as during system planning. This is a project that recently received funding from ARPA-E under the Perform program. Our partners in the work are MIT, Argonne, and Lawrence Livermore. And then we have a host of industry advisors that includes PJM, California ISO, ComEd, TVA, and OSI Soft. So that's my presentation. I hope it was of interest to the audience. We welcome the opportunity to work with folks. So if you and your organization are interested in learning more about I-CPIE, I'm happy to engage. And for those of you who may not have been to Lehigh before, I welcome you to come visit when the opportunity actually avails itself to all of us. It's a beautiful campus, and we would love to host you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for a very interesting presentation. Cybersecurity is at the top of the minds for everyone. It's interesting to learn about the different applications that the I-CPIE is looking at in transportation, in power, and the special focus on the human interface. I'm going to, we haven't received any questions from the audience. Perhaps you've answered all of them. But in the sense, if we do receive them, we will forward them to you and enable you to communicate directly with the questioner. So thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. We hope to see you again at another USEA forum.
Thank you.